Okay, firstly, welcome to the webinar on values today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a sense of what values are all about, how they impact your life, and more so, how to actually change them so you can begin to create a whole new idea of yourself and a whole new level of actions. So this can be very, very useful for anyone who's transitioning at the moment, who's looking at creating a new career, looking at starting a new business, or looking at any particular area of their life in which they wish to change. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch screens just for a moment, and if you can just bear with me, I will make this particular change. Here we go. So you can see me. Okay, great. So today, essentially what we're looking at is we're looking at values and their impact in your life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go fairly deep into values, and I'm going to give you a sense of how they can actually impact your life. So what I would be hoping that you would gain from this particular webinar is a much deeper sense of values and a much deeper sense as to how you can begin to change your motivation, how you can increase your energy levels, how you can start to find your path that's more natural for you. Perhaps this might even result in you shifting your career or starting a new business venture. Your values are critical, and they are a major, major key in all of that. And I hope by the end of this webinar, you will be very, very clear in understanding how impactful your values can actually be. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch to the actual screen so you can get to see values at a deeper level. So now, values, what I'm sharing with you today comes from our Level 2 Career and Life Mastery program, our Master's program. It's our nationally accredited NLP Master Practitioner and Life Coach training. Now, the values represents 3 days of it, and this is me, so you know who I am. My name is Rick Schnabel. I'm known as the Brain Untrainer, and that was actually given to me by a student many, many years ago, who actually said, Rick, you are more about untraining people's brains than actually training them. And I have to agree. There are so many things that we do in our patterns, in our belief systems, in our values that actually hold us back. And what it requires more than training is actually untraining. Untraining old patterns, helping to change beliefs, and helping to kind of shift the way our energy and our focus applies ourselves in our lives. So I like to be called more the Brain Untrainer rather than an NLP and life coach trainer. So just a little bit about me. This is my company, Life Beyond Limits. We started back in 2004. So we've been going over 10 years now. And we also have a couple of other companies as well. Coach Business College is where we teach life coaches the actual business side of life coaching, which I believe is a huge, huge missed set of understandings and insights that many life coaches going out there are really missing. 70% of life coaches actually fail in their first 5 years. And that's largely due to the fact that many of them do not have the business savvy that they really need to have. They're very good at what they do. They love who they support and who they help, but quite often they're not good enough at understanding the business side of things. And so that's essentially why we set up that company. That is very much about helping life coaches to become successful so that they can go out and help more people. Digital Wisdom is a joint venture with a good friend of mine, Warren French. And what Digital Wisdom is all about is providing digital content. So you don't actually buy any hard copy anything from Digital Wisdom. It's all downloadable. It's all instant. and you can get lots of audio products, lots of hypnotic audio products that you listen to at night to help evolve you, and also lots of PDF type books and programs as well. We also have a product called Breakthrough. Breakthrough is a 2-day event. It is essentially designed to help people to learn how to break through many of their patterns. It's also quite often a great introduction into neuro-linguistic programming, which I have to share. I really believe, out of all the tools and things that I've seen over the years, I believe that NLP certainly has within it good systems, good structures, good knowledge. And it was once, I think it was Edward de Bono said that if there was any course that he would recommend that we do at any time in our lives, then the course that he would highly recommend is NLP. So NLP is largely what we train. Here are our 4 levels of training. There is level 1, which is essentially Career and Life Mastery Level 1. That's our nationally accredited NLP practitioner and life coach training program. The next level on from that is called Masters, and that's level 2. That's actually a 9-day program plus a 12-month practice program that goes with that as well. And then we have another program which is really about building confidence and growing speaker ability. And we get a lot of people who have been on the speaker circuit for years, you know, and others, you know, who basically have just started, you know, in the speaking area. And so that's really to help people get rid of fear and so forth. And our trainers training, now that's an accredited program that actually teaches people how to teach NLP. But however, what we also do is we encourage them to learn other things as well, go out and teach other things as well. So that's quite critical. So these are all accredited through the ABNLP, and I've also written a few books. My latest book, which as yet is not released, but I hope to have that released by July this year. It's called Raw Courage, and it's helping people who have addictions and getting them from hooked to hero. We also have a lot of other products. Now, this is one of the products through Digital Wisdom. This is 101 strategies essentially for coaching, and to help life coaches, you know, essentially, you know, get to a point where they can actually run their business successfully. So now if I can get back to here. So okay, so this here is some of the content that we're drawing from, which is essentially the master's content. So let's talk about values and let's get straight into it. Now, here is where I realized that I got the most hugest shift in my life, if hugest is a word. Essentially what I discovered through one of my mentors, and excuse me just for one moment. Okay, back. So the thing is that what I understood, and I was working with my mentor here, I was working outside of my values, and I was in my business, I was working more at the values of, say, a Warren Buffett, which is more detail-orientated values. And my mentor suggested that what I needed to do was move out of that and start moving more to where you can see Oprah Winfrey, because my profile is more star profile than it is accumulator profile. And so star profile, when you look at the values of a star profile, the values of a star profile is typically, it's about connection, and it's about, you know, working with people. Rather than one-on-one, it's often one-on-many. And Then when you go down the bottom here to where you see deal maker, who is a person like Donald Trump, he's all about, really getting people together. He's equally about connecting, but he's more about connecting significant players together to create a deal. So this will give you a higher level sense, and I know I'm starting from a much higher level sense of values, but the value here is this. When I moved from my values from the Warren Buffetts and moved to the star profile of Oprah Winfrey, what happened for me as a result was I earned in one day what I had earned in my business the 3 months prior. So it was a big, significant shift. And what I'm really suggesting to you is that when you really understand your values, you can start playing in the game that's going to get you the best results. So then we move to here. So values, essentially, when you understand them, will free you. So let me tell you a little bit about how values equally liberated me at another point in my life. Now, one thing I was living in a city. I had some conflicts with that, in that many cities, of course, can have high pollution rates. And a good friend of mine who works in the police department had shared a story with me when he said that in his early training, they went to the morgue, and, perhaps it was to desensitize themselves around a dead body, of course. They opened up a body to reveal their lungs. And what actually happened is the lungs, they immediately noticed, were all blackened. So they all in unison all said, obviously, it's a smoker. Well, the guy who was conducting the training said, actually, no, this particular guy is a city dweller. Now, that really conflicted with my values. Now, to get a sense of my life and my values and the importance of values within me, is I have a family, I have 2 young daughters, and immediately it conflicted with my values. I thought about what about their lungs, because we were living right in the middle of a city. So what I decided is I wanted to create a shift. I wanted to move to a more natural environment with a more healthy air quality, and also I have a value which is surfing. So this here is a fantastic surf break. In fact, the moment I finish this webinar, that's where I'm going. The surf is really beautiful today. It's great waves, so I'll be going there. So that equally is one of my values in my lifestyle. So I realized that I had to change my values in order to get this lifestyle. So equally, I wanted something else. I was working ridiculous hours, actually. I was working from 7 in the morning, often sometimes 6 in the morning, right through to midnight. And I was working every day of the year, except for, say, January and the tail end of December. So I wanted my year to change. And as you can see, actually I don't work January now, but, I just wanted to work a little bit in February, a little bit in March, a little bit in April, May, have a break through June, July, work all through August, all through December, a little bit in November, and September and October. Now, that's what my year looked like. It looks a bit different now. But essentially, I wanted to work less hours, less days, and I wanted to balance my life out a little bit more. So that was another goal. Equally, I wanted to commune with nature. I wanted to get closer to nature. I wanted to be a lot more free. Now, that surf beach that I spoke about was only about 2 days ago. I was out surfing, and I surfed on the same wave that 4 other dolphins were surfing as well. So very, very cool. Well, mind you, they're my values. And so equally, I wanted a healthy lifestyle for my family. Yet here is my daughter having a donut. But here essentially is my family. I wanted to spend more time with my family. and have a freer life. I wanted also to eat healthier foods. A vegetable garden, ideally was a great idea in that context, or eating more organic food. And I wanted to see the sunrise from my bedroom. And now this is actually the very first photo that I took when I moved into my new home on the Sapphire Coast of New South Wales. And this is the sun coming up first thing in the morning. It was absolutely gorgeous. So that was the very first photo I took at my new house. Now, the only way that I could change that was to change my values. So essentially, to get here, I had to change my values. And the values that I changed were my career values. I seriously looked at what I had to do and be in my career to create the opportunity to work less and balance my life out a bit better. And so values are really critical when you're going through a transition, when you want to transition. And so let me go deeper into values. So as I say, the content's coming out of our Career and Life Mastery program, where essentially we spend 3 days on values, and it's all about shifting our wealth, our health, our stealth, any area of our life really, because values at the end of the day determine everything. So what I'm aiming to do is in this hour give you at least a really good, well-rounded understanding of values, so you can actually take it out into your life and do something about it. So what is the definition of values? Now, this is my definition of values. I believe that our values are really our fuel and our focus. Where you will typically be aligned to your top 3 values. And your top 3 values will often govern your behavior, the very things that you do. They will give you certain energy, and they will have you focused in a certain area. And as a result, you can rocket off into all sorts of areas of your life. So if you look at the word fuel, the way I want you to think about that is energy. So when we're working against our values, typically you'll know because your energy will diminish, your energy will drop. When you are focused in your values, living your values, you'll find you have an abundance of energy. For example, even though I don't work as much as I used to, when I do work, I love doing what I do, and it gives me a real high level of energy. So I know I'm actually living my values. Equally, it keeps me focused. No one has to tell me to get up earlier in the morning, work later at night. There are often times that I might work till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And it's because I'm very focused and I'm very energized and I love what I do. In fact, when I work, I get more energy rather than when I work, getting less energy. So if you're working in a job that at the end of the day, you are absolutely tired as, then chances are you're not serving your values in your career. That's a really good indication. So if you look a bit like this, that is, if you're at a point where, essentially you're finding that your energy is massively diminished, then typically you are not living your values, or you're not working your values. So here is another example of that. If you get to a point that you're absolutely dog-tired, then chances are you're not really living your values. Now, here is another insight into values. Now, some people think that the only way to get their point across is to speak it louder, almost shout at you or be very dominating, but the reason that people have to be like that is typically they're not meeting a person's values. If you're meeting a person's values, they will listen, they will hear, they will connect. But if you're not meeting their values, then typically that's when, if like, for example, if you're a manager or a leader of people, one thing that's really important and very critical in the context of values is that, what we have to understand is that, our values largely, if we're really speaking into people's values, we don't have to boss them around. We don't really have to, get to a point where we're telling them what to do all the time, what you'll typically find is that they know what to do and they will do it because it meets their values too. So here is another perspective of values in the context of relationships. And over the years, I've done a lot of couples coaching. And typically, couples, when they're at a point in their relationship where they're almost considering divorcing each other or leaving each other, often that's the wrong time to be really getting some coaching. However, many of them came because they had no other success in many other areas that they tried. Now, the first place that I will look when I'm working with couples is I'll look at their values. I'll typically work with two of them at once, and together, the both of them, and find out exactly what their actual issues or problems may be. And then what I'll do is I will do a values elicitation with the two of them. And then from that, I will get enormous insights into what's going on in their relationship. Now, the large majority of problems and issues that we have are going to be values-based. Let me give you an example. I'm going to apologize to men on this webinar in advance, because typically, if a man does not know what his values are, and I would argue that 95% of men do not, if they don't know what their values are, then they will go to their default value. And the default value typically is survival, or a survivalist type of value. One of those values might just simply be work. I've got to work because I've got to pay for the mortgage. I've got bills to pay, Oh my God, don't you appreciate me? I put food in the cupboard. I put food in the fridge. I put food on the table. I pay for this house. They're often the sorts of arguments that will come up, whenever I'm coaching couples, because he's in survivalist. Now, where there's the conflict is he's in survival. She is perhaps not even aware of her values, and she'll go to her default values, which are often connection. And you'll often see women particularly will often create big clusters of groups, lots of connections, lots of people, lots of networks, whereas men tend to shrink their networks because it raises too much competition. Now, by the way, that's a whole webinar on its own, and I promise at some point I will do a webinar just on this topic, because there's just so much to be gained and learned from it. So essentially, what you get here, and this picture tells it really, really well. Here is a guy who is working when he could be connecting to his wife, his girlfriend, and she's seeking connection, and she looks bored out of her brain, and he's focused only on the computer. Now, this I see is a massive problem, not only in couples, but in families where, devices seem to be the vices of today. So that's a conflict that's going on, and whenever we have issues or problems, there's always a values conflict. So another thing that values will do is they will determine what you will do and equally what you won't do. For example, sometimes our values will have us actually miss opportunities. And let's say, going back to the survivalist values, or safety values, what we'll often do is we will start moving ourselves to a point where we are actually, where we're not in a point of our lives where we are really taking those exits that we should be taking or could be taking, those opportunities that we could be taking. We're ignoring them because of perhaps our survivalist values, because we're scared to take that risk and get that dream job just in case it doesn't work, or just in case we don't get the income that we need, and so forth. So values are a really good thing to begin to correct when we're transitioning, as I mentioned earlier. Here is another example of values, and this is in the context of smoking. Now, what I've often seen with smokers is that smokers will often sacrifice their health for the value of socialization. You know, you might notice that many smokers, particularly in the workplace, they have certain times that they will go outside and congregate together and smoke. Equally, they might meet up in a pub at the end of a day, or at a cafe. Well, actually, you can't smoke in cafes anymore, but they'll meet up somewhere and they will go out for a cigarette. Now, the moment that they quit smoking, all of a sudden they lose their socialization. So what happens is they decide to keep smoking because it keeps the socialization going. And what that simply means is values are in a hierarchy. So it just means in the context of health, a person is valuing smoking, that is their non-health, above their good health. And I hope that makes sense. So here is another context of values, and that is the context of what we will and won't do. Now, some people, for example, won't put themselves in situations where they're actually compromising their safety. Now, some people would think, perhaps, as this gentleman riding, what looks to be, a fairly sizable 12, 13-foot wave, this particular guy, looks like he's having a huge amount of fun. Some people would be scared witless, to do exactly that. Because, and really at the end of the day, it's just about values. Now look at it in this context. If the thrill is bigger than the spill, then we will typically move ourselves forward. But if our spill is greater than our thrill, then we won't move ourselves forward. So in essence, what that means, thrill could really be described as courage. Spill could be described as fear. And anytime our fear is greater than our momentum or our motivation to do something, typically what's going to happen is we won't do it. So the thrill has to be bigger than the spill. So our values equally determine our worth. Now, the moment someone sees us, they will ask questions in their head about our skills. They will ask, what sort of level of skills do they think we have? Equally, what is our intelligence? What is our speed? What is our passion? What is our integrity? Are we determined or not? Are we flexible? Do we have good health? Are we here for the long term? What about our age? Are we older or younger? What about our network? So these are how people see you. Now, a lot of research suggests that in the first 3 seconds of seeing someone, we will make all these judgments and we will answer questions such as these. So that means that people are determining our values by observing us and listening to us and getting a sense of us and feeling us. So what we really want to do is instead, we want to determine our own values. As is often said, you need to determine you before others determine you. Otherwise, you're going to be determined, your success is going to be determined by everybody else. So the way to then do this is to grow your values, to work out what are your values and then begin to grow your values. And the only way you can grow your values is to know your values. And further into this webinar, I'm going to actually teach you a way that you can elicit and discover what your actual values are. And this is what I'm really going to be encouraging everyone on this webinar to do. Perhaps on a weekend or one evening. It really only takes you about anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes to determine what are your values in your career or your health or your wealth. Any area that's not working, find out what your values are, and then you'll probably find out why it's not working. So let me start talking about the Beatles. Now, the Beatles were, in my view, an amazing band. I have the large majority of all the Beatles albums. I was a big fan of the Beatles. Now, they came to the United States in February 1964, starting the so-called British invasion of the American music scene. Of course, they created a huge string of hits, became massively popular, and most people thought that they were an overnight success. But the truth of the matter is, John Lennon and Paul McCartney, the two, for those of you who don't know the Beatles, that is John Lennon with the glasses. Paul McCartney is sitting right next to him in the blue. And so these two individuals started playing together in 1957. So that was 7 years prior to even landing in America. So when we look at the Beatles, what you have to understand is that they weren't an overnight success. They really knew what their values were. Now, I know this might sound a bit funny, but the truth of the matter is their values, besides their love of music, their values was, getting plastered and having sex. They were just quite typical of that age bracket, that were thinking typically below the waist a lot of the time and getting wasted a lot of the time. So that an opportunity came about when they were invited to go to Hamburg. Now, Hamburg at that time actually didn't have rock and roll acts. They just had lots of strip clubs, and they would go 24/7. So what happened was one entrepreneur in Hamburg decided to get music and bring music into the clubs instead. So he had a mindset, his value was 24/7. His value was hard work. So typically when the Beatles came in and they were used to playing 1 hour gigs, his values were different to theirs. And he simply said, if you want to play for me and stay here in Hamburg, therefore you have to play at least 8-hour sets. So what happened was they were playing a lot of music. And to cover 8 hours, well, you have to have either a lot of songs that you have remembered from other artists, or you've got to create your own. Now, this is how the dynamic of John Lennon and Paul McCartney began to evolve, because they had to start writing a lot of songs. And they got good at writing a lot of songs quickly. And many of the Beatles' early songs were very simple chord structures, very simple songs. Now, this is what John Lennon said. He said, we got better and got more confidence. We couldn't help it with all the experience playing all night long. It was handy, them being foreign, that is, those people in Hamburg. We had to try even harder, put our heart and soul into it to get ourselves over. I think what he meant is over the line. He said, in Liverpool, we'd only ever done 1 hour sessions, and we just used to do our best numbers, the same ones at every one. In Hamburg, we had to play for 8 hours, so we really had to find a new way of playing. So in essence, what happened is, because they knew their values, they chased their values at a very early age. Now, within 10 years of John Lennon and Paul McCartney playing together, they got to the point that they had played for at least 10,000 hours. Now, there is an old formula here that suggests if you do anything for 10,000 hours, which will typically take you on average anywhere between 7 and 10 years, that's where you start gaining massive success. Here is the problem. A lot of people don't know their values, so they go job hopping, or they go vocation hopping, or avocation hopping. They jump from thing to thing. Just as they're starting to get good, they jump out and do something else. And it's because they do not know their values. Here is a big opportunity for the educational institutions around the world. We could be eliciting our child's values way before they start choosing careers. A lot of educational institutions do not do that. And as a result of that, it creates a problem for the large multitude of people, on planet Earth who have got no idea what their values are. So here are some more values. Now, John Lennon valued creativity. Paul McCartney valued perfection. So that worked very, very well hand in hand, because John Lennon's creativity helped to stimulate the music that Paul McCartney and John Lennon worked together on. And then Paul McCartney would work to actually perfect that music, perfect those words for those songs. But eventually what would happen is they would work against each other. And it was essentially, a lot of people blame Yoko Ono and others for the split of the Beatles, but the truth of the matter, it was a conflict of values between Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and of course Ringo Starr and George Harrison, who Ringo and George were starting to write their own material, and they weren't being included in many of their albums. You know, so it was really time for the Beatles to actually naturally split and go their own way. Because John Lennon, in the latter part of the Beatles, would do these insane, crazy creative endings to a lot of the songs. That really conflicted with Paul McCartney's perfectionism. You know, so they were naturally going to go their separate ways. You know, so, you know, let's take Yoko Ono off the hook here. You know, so, you know, but then again, a lot of people, of course, do not understand values to this level. So, of course, you know, that's why people blame the Beatles or Yoko Ono for this split, but it wasn't Yoko Ono. So, Richard Branson, I'm going to show you some photos here, and I want you to get a sense of Richard Branson and his values. So, you know, here he is on the Graham Norton show. You know, here he is, you know, in a paddock with a motorbike. You know, here he is contemplating space. Now, if you begin to observe a person and their behaviors, often you can tell what their values are. And if you really understand Richard Branson, just simply by looking at these pictures, you might get a sense that one of his values might be fun. Another one of his values is adventure. You know, very clear when you look at, you know, his space travel, you know, and the sorts of things that he does, you know, to amuse himself, are very much encapsulated within fun and adventure. But he's a billionaire, so you know, wealth is also a very high level value for him. Now, when I first studied Richard Branson, his number one value was fun, his number two was adventure, and his number three value was wealth. It may have changed. I don't really think so, though. I would say still today, his number one is fun, number two adventure, number three is wealth. But your values predicate your behavior. Your behavior predicates your life, the actions that you do, and so forth. So your values actually determine your destiny. So here is Oprah Winfrey. Let's look at her destiny by her three core values. Core value number one, manage your relationships. Core value number two, define and pursue your vision. Core value number three, live your best life. Now, with those sorts of core values, it is very simple to assume that here is a woman who is going to succeed. Now, Oprah Winfrey has got a lot of charisma, and a lot of charisma comes from her relationships values. You know, she is very much about connecting with people. And, you know, remember, as a journalist, Oprah Winfrey was able to really elicit great stuff from her guests on her Oprah show. And that came from a number one value, you know, manage your relationships. She, by the way, is NLP trained. And so all the communication skills of NLP, she totally embodies them. And she's obviously done a lot of belief work on herself and a whole bunch of other things. And so the next, define and pursue your vision. Now, her vision equally has evolved over the years and gotten bigger and bigger. And what really turned her to billionaire was her number one value was relationships. And one of her good friends is Steven Spielberg. Now, Steven Spielberg, she was having a conversation with, and she realized that if she modeled Steven Spielberg, she could take her life to the next level. She could actually live her best life by creating a production company. Because Steven Spielberg said to her, Oprah, if you really want to own your content, you've got to own the production company. And so that's what inspired her to model Steven Spielberg's, DreamWorks type model. And, and essentially what happened from there is she was able to live her best life, through her production company, Harpo. So there are two types of people that I see. And many of these people, like Richard Branson, the Beatles, Oprah Winfrey, there are numerous people who are definitely living their best life. And the reason they're living their best life is because they fall in this category. They follow the values path. They know their values. Somehow, through their lives, they understood what was really important to them. They never sacrificed their values. They stayed true to their values. And they never prostituted themselves. They never sold out. They stayed true to their values, and they created a values path, which is a way to get through the maze of confusion and distraction. Because remember, values are about energy and focus. If you know what your values are, you will have a lot of energy and a lot of focus down your path. But if you don't know what your values are, how do you know what path to take? And so a large majority of people take the other path, the path of convention. Constantly what they're really doing is they're just really following everybody else, and they're listening to everybody else. I had a conversation just recently with someone about values, and she asked me a question, this particular person, and she said, why is it that, I seem to know what I'm doing or what I want to do, and then all of a sudden, I have a conversation with someone and then I'm confused. I'm not sure whether what I want to do is the right thing. And I said to her, the reason for that is because you don't know what your values are. You're unclear of what your values are, and for that particular reason, you're being swayed really easily by other people's dream jobs or other people's opinions and ideas. So if we don't know what our values are, we find ourselves going through a maze until eventually we find ourselves in a corner, or we find ourselves in a place that we don't enjoy or don't like. So I hope I'm really getting this to you, that your values are really critical to your success, or knowing them. So here is a magic number, and this I hope will really put an exclamation mark at the end of what I just said. The magic number is 95%. So here's 95%. The ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, came out with a quote about 4 or 5 years ago, actually I think probably 5 years ago. And they said that based on the large majority of Australians, that by the time they retired, they would fall in one of three categories. They said 95% of Australians would fall in one of three categories at some point during their retirement. At one point, they would be dead. Now, that goes without saying. Eventually we're all going to die. But these were the horrifying ones. They also said that equally, there would be a group of people that would be dead broke, and that there would be a group of people putting their hand out for government assistance. Now, when you think about this, this is what has been largely leading our governments, particularly here in Australia, to start imposing all these new taxes. And really, they're taxes because they know that they're going to need a lot more funding in the healthcare industry, and also to ensure that people aren't on the streets. And this horrifies me. And the reason that a lot of people fall in these categories is they don't know their values. Another of the 95% is that 95% of the post-financial crisis growth was gained by the wealthiest 1%. In fact, 30% of the market went backwards. So 95% of the wealthiest 1% gained, the largest percentage of growth, during the post-financial crisis, when the economy was not so good. Equally, 95% will regain weight after their diet. And the only reason that anyone's going to regain weight is because they haven't adjusted their values to really be congruent with their new body. their new self. If you're going to do anything like, lose weight or, or transition in any area of your life, your values are the key. 95% of people have no idea of their values, and that's why all of these things exist. So here is a particular quote, and this guy was famous inventor Thomas Edison. He said that 5% of people think, 10% of people think they think, and the other 85% would rather die than think. In other words, 95% of the population really don't think enough. They have idle thought, but they don't think. And they're being largely guided by their unconscious. So I'll talk a little bit about our conscious fairly soon, but this is where you'll find the large majority of your values are actually unconscious. That is, people don't think enough or invest the time in their thinking to elicit their values and find out what is their guiding principle. So here is a guy by the name of Shui Kera. Now, he essentially said in his book, You Can Win, he said the 7 reasons that people fail is 1, they lack persistence, and the reason people lack persistence is because they're job hopping, they're avocation hopping, they're jumping from one thing to the next thing because they discover that when they get into that job, they discover that it's not as good as they thought it was. Well, it's not really not as good as they thought it was, is that they haven't aligned their values with their choices. And so they discover that there's a conflict. And so they quit their job. Equally, so goes, there's a lack of conviction. They're not convicted to what they do. Now, the third reason that people fail is they rationalize away their failures. They go, oh, well, I wasn't meant to get that job, or it wasn't meant to be. The truth is you can make anything happen. But if you keep rationalizing things away, well, of course, you're just going to have failure after failure after failure. Failure to learn is point 4. If you fail, you really haven't failed if you learn from it. But a lot of people don't reflect enough to actually work out what is the lesson. And you will only reflect when you are following your values. If you're not following your values, you will abandon everything. Equally, a lack of discipline, again, it comes down to values. If we're living our values, we will create the discipline to ensure that we meet our values. Let me give you an example. I wouldn't be on this webinar right now. In fact, I'd be in the ocean having a surf if I didn't value contributing. And contribution is a really high-level value for me. It's really important for me to contribute back into humanity. And I feel by doing this, I'm contributing into your life, and I hope I am. So I create the discipline myself. No one tells me, that I have to do this webinar. I'm doing it because I'm disciplined enough to go, yes, I will get my surf in, but I'll get my surf in after the webinar. This is more important than surfing. And that's really what values actually are. It's really about a hierarchy of what's more important. So equally, low self-esteem. Low self-esteem, I think, is actually at the cause of most people's issues and problems, and their courage to actually take action on their dreams and their vision. But if you are living your values, what you'll find is that each particular day, what you'll get is that each particular day you'll keep doing what you do, and what will happen as a result of doing what you do, you're going to build skill, and skill is what builds your self-esteem. If you keep building your skill, getting recognition for your skill, you will start building external esteem. Eventually, you get to a point where you feel satisfied with what you're doing, and you'll create self-esteem. So that, again, is about values. Fatalistic attitude. Now, fatalistic attitude is basically simply saying, well, you know, I wasn't meant to get that job, or I wasn't meant to have that success, or I'm not supposed to be successful, or I'm not meant to be rich, you know, etc., etc. Well, a fatalistic attitude stops people from trying. And your values, you know, if you are living your values, you will keep trying, you will keep moving until you build that skill to create the successes that you really want in life. And, you know, fate will have nothing to do with it. So the 7 reasons people fail is because they don't know their values. So under all of this, you know, it all is really about people's values. So here is another way to look at values. So I'm going to do this in a metaphor. Think of yourself as a boat. So you are the boat. So the boat's really going to go nowhere until we get in the boat. And that's our why, our very reason to get in the boat. So the next thing that happens is to ensure that we can move that boat along, we're going to need some skills if the wind comes from one direction or if the wind comes from another direction. The skills are really, metaphorically, are the sails. So the boat's going to go around in circles unless, when an opportunity comes, we have to know how to move that boat, and that boat will be moved by its rudder. So a good way to think about values is think about values as your rudder. Your values determine which way you go. You know, and the only other thing that's really going to stop you at the end of the day from succeeding are your limiting beliefs. You know, they will often be, metaphorically, your anchor. So that's how to think about values. You know, your values are largely your rudder of your boat. They pretty much determine which island you get to. So let me show you it in another way. So this is a thing that I designed many years ago called the wealth matrix. And essentially the way that you think about this is with using 2 definitions here. One is meaning and one is expertise. So when we look at creating wealth, what we need to have is we need to raise the level of meaning, or our reason why, or our purpose, or our rationalizing away why we do what we do. So if it's futile, then there's not a lot of meaning in it. If it's trivial, there's a little bit more meaning, but it's not all that much. Conventional is the conventional line. It's just kind of, you're doing it because everyone else is doing it. And that's what I mean by conventional. If we go beyond that, we've got to start having a bit of a vision. So we've got to start being more visionary. Equally, if we really want to put momentum into our visions, then we've got to have high level purpose. There's got to be a very high level of meaning. Let me give you an example. With Life Beyond Limits, when I first began Life Beyond Limits, the reason that I started Life Beyond Limits was because of my purpose. I know this might sound crazy, but I feel within myself that I must, before I die, I must create a company with systems and structures that help humanity to be kinder to themselves. You know, in essence, to put the kind back in humankind. And that's essentially why I do what I do, because I want us to be kinder to one another. I want us to, you know, live our dreams and create a better world for my children and my children's children and so forth. So I'm doing it for very selfish reasons, you know, but the thing is that, you know, in essence, because of my level of purpose is the reason I'm still doing this, you know, 10 years after I started. You know, if you don't have enough purpose, chances are you'll quit. And, you know, we don't want to do that. In the context of building your expertise, we start looking at the low levels of being incompetent, meaning not really a great deal of expertise at all. Awkward means we kind of know what to do, but we're not doing it, you know, in a competent way. Then we can go one step further from competence, and we can start moving to elegant. And elegant is now when we're doing it quite gracefully. And there's one level beyond that, and that's masterful. That's when we are so masterful at it. That analogy that I gave you earlier, the 10,000 hours, I would suggest that you would agree with me here that the Beatles were quite masterful at their craft. You know, they got very, very good at their production qualities in their music, and you know, and they really broke a lot of boundaries, and you know, created some new styles, and really inspired a lot of people to get into the music industry. So they became quite masterful, but they became masterful over time. So if you have high level purpose, you'll go the distance. So let's look at this further. So people in this quadrant often in their career will often say, well, what's the point? You know, I'm just doing it for the money, perhaps. You know, what's the point? But here at this level, what they're asking is a different question. What's the idea? What's the cause? What's the reason we're doing this? Now, if we move over here, people who even might be really good at what they do, but there's no purpose, will often say, well, I'm just doing it for the money. So what we ideally want to do is we want to be able to, over time, move with purpose, move our expertise to become quite masterful at what we do. So in essence, you have a dream, and then over time, you actually live your dream. So the analogy I gave you at the beginning, you know, which was talking essentially about the Sapphire Coast, about me moving to the Sapphire Coast. Well, I didn't just do that straight away. I shuffled and changed my values, you know, back in 2011, so I could meet my goal, which I did in 2012. So in May 2012, I moved to the Sapphire Coast with my family, and it took about a year to create what I needed to in order for that shift to occur. So I had a dream, and through creating expertise, I eventually lived my dream. I could say that today I am living my ideal life. And so what I'm encouraging everyone on this particular webinar is to, you know, utilize your values in a way that creates your ultimate dream, and that is you living it, and that is going beyond your limits. And you'll only go beyond your limits when you have high level purpose. So if we look at this quadrant has, you know, they're only at the level, the extreme is they're doing the conventional thing, and they're just competent at it. So they are living their minimal skills, minimal ideas, minimal creativity and knowledge. These people, they have lots of purpose, lots of desire, but no real experience, no real application of that experience, and nor do they have any momentum. So these people in this quadrant, they certainly have skills, and lots of them, yet they negate the application and passion. You know, they negate it because there's not really enough purpose in it. And these people, they certainly have purpose and they have skills. So these people are dreamers, you know, lots of ideas, but don't seem to get their feet on the ground and get things off and running. These people often get sick, by the way. You know, there's been so many studies now of people who are not living their purpose tend to get sicker more often. And people in this quadrant often get sick because they feel they're just not good enough in their jobs, and they're not good enough because they're not interested enough. And, you know, these people here often snap. Now, you know, I've coached so many people over the years who are in this category. And, you know, they're people who basically are at a point where they've just had enough. You know, they're just doing it for the money. And eventually it gets to the point where just money just isn't good enough. You know, you need to have reason to make money. I know money is important, but you've got to have good reason to make it. And if you have good reason to make it, you'll make more. So these people, of course, they have passion. You know, they have what it takes to actually create their ideal life. So I hope that gives you a sense of how important your values actually are, because they will give you a lot of purpose and they'll have you doing what you need to do to get quite masterful at what you do. And so this, of course, is an idea of how you can move forward. So when we talk about values, they are definitely the rudder of our lives. And they're the rocket fuel. They're the fuel and the focus of our lives, and they'll get us taking off. They'll essentially lead us down a path. Now, the truth is that the future for you and me and everyone is actually unknown. But we make it known by making choices, making decisions, and we choose to go down a path even though we can only see a certain distance ahead. But we will choose to go down that path if it aligns with our values. So in essence, you know, what happens is our values determine, because it's the rudder of our boat, it determines what island we end up on. For some, it looks like this. For others, it looks like this. For others, it looks like this. And it all comes from our values. So I said earlier that our values are largely unconscious. Let me explain a little bit between the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious. So the conscious, it is largely assumed that about 5 to 10% of everything we do is conscious. A large majority of what we do is actually in our subconscious. And the bigger part of the iceberg that sits under the water represents our unconscious. It's the lion's share of who we are. Now, what that means is, think about this. If you wanted to make a phone call right now, you would be consciously thinking of making a phone call. You might not remember the number, but with a little bit of thought and focus, you could remember the number, because the number is in the subconscious. But if you can't remember that number at all, then chances are it's in the unconscious. Through hypnosis, for example, we could get you to elicit that number, but we'd have to get into your unconscious and we'd have to get beyond your conscious. So, you know, quite often a lot of people, of course, use hypnosis and use, you know, techniques like neuro-linguistic programming to get into unconscious patterns to change our patterns, because quite often we can't change patterns consciously because they're actually not at the conscious level at all. They're not even in the subconscious, they're actually in the unconscious. So that's where our values are. And I'm going to show you a way how you can actually elicit the values in your unconscious. And the large reason why 95% of people don't know what their values are is they've never done a process to elicit their values or discover them and find them out. So the way to start is, first of all, what we want to do is we want to work out what area of our life is not working. So the way to do this is the wheel of life. And by the way, you can replicate this, you can pause this and draw this. And what you can then do is you can essentially work out exactly what area of your life needs some work. And the way to do it is, imagine that in the middle of the circle where all those lines meet, the number is 0. And at the very extreme of the circle, at the circumference, it's 10. It represents 10. So if, for example, you believe in the personal growth realm that you're a 10, that means you're totally satisfied with where you are right now in your personal growth. And by the way, that's going to vary over time. Sometimes it'll be up, sometimes it'll be down, depending upon, you know, your challenges in life. So what happens is you just simply put a measure, just quickly put a measure, you know, where you think you are in each of those areas. And of course, what's going to happen is when you connect all those dots, you'll find that there's an area of your life that you're not really satisfied in. So that's a good place to start in your values. So what you'll then do is say, right, I will elicit my health values. And how do you do that? This is how you do that. You basically, step one, you determine the area that you're going to focus on. In this context, we're focusing on health. Step two, we then ask one question, which I'll share with you after this. And you ask that one question again and again and again. Step four, you get beyond two boundary conditions, meaning that you keep asking a question until a person or yourself, as you're asking the questions to yourself, you get to a point where you stop and you have no more answers to the questions. Now, two boundary conditions means that you get to two blank spots. So you keep asking the question, even though a person has got to a point where they cannot answer the question. Because what we are, as Einstein said, is we are locked in by the boundary conditions of our thinking. So this process will often get you unlocked and get you beyond the levels of values that you're eliciting, and you'll start to get more deeper level unconscious values, which is exactly what you want to achieve. So this is going to make a lot more sense in a moment. So the step five is that you number them by level of importance. So you number your values by what is most important. The most important value out of all of the words that you elicit, the most important will be number one. The second most important will be number two, third most important, number three, and so forth. Your number one value will have far more influence on your behavior, your thinking, your actions, and your life than any other number further down the line of your values. So that gives you a clue. To change your life, you shift your values. Now, I'm not going to fully go through how you actually shift your values, because that's a whole entire conversation that will go on for a lot more than an hour. But one purpose of this webinar is to pre-train all the people that are coming in our Career and Life Mastery Level 2 program to prepare them for that program. So if you're not doing that program, the essence of what you'll get from this is to know, A, how important your values are, B, also you'll learn how to elicit your values. Though if you do want to shift and shuffle and change your values, then that's something that you'll get from our Career and Life Mastery Level 2 program, where we'll help you to do that. We invest 3 days on values alone. There is so much content on values, and it's so important that that's why we'll spend 3 days on it. So here is how to elicit the values. Here's your question. So the question that you ask, and you just keep asking this question again and again, is what is most important to you in the context of your, and that's the categories we were talking about, in your health, your wealth, relationships, career, finances, social life. So work out what are the areas that you really want to focus on, and then focus your values in those areas. Don't do your health, wealth, and relationship values all in one sitting. Just focus on your health values or your wealth values or your relationship or career values and so forth. So that's the question you ask. So it sounds like, what is most important to you in the context of your wealth? So if you're not getting the wealth that you really want, eliciting your values is going to give you a lot of answers as to why you're not gaining wealth. So your values, as I said, exist in a hierarchy. So here is a gentleman. Let's say his number one value is achievement. His number two is status. His number three is loyalty. His number four are rewards. His number five is team. But the reason that he's here is because he's not getting wealth. As I mentioned earlier, if someone is not getting wealth, chances are they don't have enough distinctions around their wealth values. You know, here, these values here are in the context of this gentleman's career. So let's say he's working in a job, and as long as he is achieving, he is satisfied, you know, to a certain level. He also wants to be satisfied as gaining status or the opportunity to gain more status. And status could be perceived as position. So if he gets into a manager's role, that will meet his number 2 value. Equally, if he's there for the long term in the job, and they keep him in the job, then it'll meet his number 3 value, loyalty. Now, the rewards might simply be a slap on the back, or, some public acknowledgement. Equally, values 5 is team, being part of a team. So they're his values, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to create any wealth. Some people might think that achievement or status will give you wealth, and it might, but there's no guarantee that it will, because someone could simply say, hey, would you want to take over the manager's role? Yeah, sure, no problems, I'll do that. But someone who has wealth in their values will answer quite differently. They will say, yeah, sure, I'd love to be a manager. So what are we talking about financially here? Does that make sense? So just having wealth in your values higher up the hierarchy just simply means you're putting more focus, more energy in that area of your career. So this is where shuffling a person's values can make such a big difference. And this is how we do it in NLP. So what we do is we can't just put a word up at, say, level 2. Let's say, this gentleman really wants to make a big difference in his wealth. So we're going to have to put wealth really high in his values. I wouldn't put it at number 1. And the reason I wouldn't put it at number 1 is you need to have a reason to create wealth rather than just wealth in and of itself. I will never change anyone's values to money or wealth or rich as their number 1 value, because typically they become a little bit sacrificial to their networks, to themselves, in order just to achieve money. And sometimes a person like that will often die with a hole in their soul. Might make a lot of money, but sacrifices too many things in order to make that money. So it's more important, in my view, to create wealth with a purpose and a reason that contributes in some way to adding value to people's lives. So what we'll do is we'll look at these things. Let's say we're going to move it to number 2. We'll look at wealth and status, and we'll look at the neurology. So there's a specific way we do that in neuro-linguistic programming, and there's a specific way that we teach you to do that in our Career and Life Mastery Level 2 program. And the key is that the way that we code and store ideas such as wealth and status are going to be very different. Like if wealth does not appear in our values anywhere in our career values, yet status is number 2, the way that we code and store status as opposed to wealth will be very, very different. So what we'll do is we'll work out what are these values in a neurological sense, and we'll associate them neurologically, therefore bringing wealth much, much higher up the values. And this is where you get the most profound shifts in people by changing their values. It's like, for example, just turning someone's rudder on their boat. Just a few degrees can make a significant difference. Like 3 degrees shift in a plane going from Australia is the difference to America, is the difference between landing in New York or Florida. Big difference. So again, big difference in a rocket ship, big difference in momentum. So our values, for all of those people who are attending our Career and Life Mastery program, this is essentially what we'll be doing. We'll be eliciting your career values. We'll also be looking at your motivational values, the values that really create energy and get you motivated. We do this really cool technique where we will get you to embrace your motivational values and direct them into an area of your fears, things that you're not doing, and you watch what happens, how quickly someone starts moving through their fears and starts moving to create some momentum in their lives. Now, threshold values are essentially, particular things where you will essentially walk away from your values. They're values that typically you will sacrifice your main values, and they're another classification called threshold values. Then there's beyond threshold values. There, now, here is a threshold value. Let me give you a deeper example of this. Threshold values are things such as, something where you might be, let's say you get achievement, and let's say that's your number one value. Let me just go, back a couple of slides. So if I go to, where are we? Values in the hierarchy. So if we go to here, so let's say this gentleman's number 1, 2, and 3 values are being met in his company. He's getting achievement, he's getting status, he's getting loyalty, and let's say he's equally getting rewards and team, and he's getting wealth now. But the thing is that the company is deceptive. They cheat, they lie. And, as a result of that, what happens essentially is because they cheat and lie, he will walk away from the company. So that's what I mean by essentially what are your threshold values. Threshold values are values that will have you divorce all your values. And in the Career and Life Mastery program, for those who are attending, look forward to finding out what your threshold values are. They're very interesting a lot of the time. So equally, there's another value, and that is beyond threshold values. So they're values that should they then come into your life, you will actually stay in the job even though there are threshold values. So values are fascinating. So of course, we're going to shift and add values and then neurologically align them to you so that you totally are your values. You don't have to think about them consciously, you just are your values. And that's really important. So, here is another cool thing that we do in our Career and Life Mastery program is we look at installing values. So what we do is we look at someone like Richard Branson. So here is your home plate. For those attending the Career and Life Mastery program, I want you to think of someone like Richard Branson. Now, he, of course, his number 1 value is fun, his number 2 is adventure, and his number 3 is wealth. Now, if you want to live a life like Richard Branson, then we do this really cool process where we elicit Richard Branson's values and some of his meta programs, which, of course, I haven't spoken about at length, and that again is a lot of content, so I won't be talking about meta programs, but essentially we'll look at his behaviors, his meta programs, his values, and we'll install them into your neurology. Now, that doesn't mean that instantly you're going to have 10,000 companies, you're going to turn into a billionaire overnight. What it means is it means that you will be more like Richard Branson in his behaviors. And by the way, you won't all of a sudden get golden locks and grow a goatee. But the thing is that your behavior will be more like Richard Branson. This is a really cool process that we do in our Career and Life Mastery program, level 2. So what your home play is for those who are doing the program, and for those of you out there who are not, begin to think about, who do you aspire to? Who would you like to become more like? And perhaps look at their values, and you can start installing their values. So here is the most important part, is to understand. Now, this is what we call our success matrix. I'll get that word right, success matrix. And so largely the very platform, the foundation, the strongest element of our success is going to come from our attitude. And what makes up our attitude are our beliefs, our values, and our meta programs. So the next part of success, our attitude determines what we do and what we don't do, particularly our values. The next thing is our actions actually build our skill. It's what we're doing with repetition that creates mastery. And finally, to ensure that we create repetition, we have to create systems to specifically replicate things over and over again so that we can test and measure what we do, and so we can keep perfecting what we do, doing the Paul McCartney on our business. So being quite perfectionistic and keep testing, measuring, testing and measuring. But the truth of the matter is 80% of our success is our attitude. So this is why, I'm suggesting that, understanding what your values are is going to be quite key in fast tracking your success. So, you know, I'm about creating massive, massive results from small change, not changing everything, but creating massive results from small change. So massive results from small change is really knowing what your values are. That's the key to a lot of people that you know that are highly successful. It's got a lot to do with them knowing their values and really choosing very good values and then neurologically associating those values. So here is the process that we take people through. We, as I mentioned earlier, one of our programs is Breakthrough Beyond Limits. That's a 2-day event that we teach people NLP, and we teach people life coaching skills, and we help people to learn how to break through their previous barriers of entry into new areas of their life. Our level 1 program is our career and life mastery program. That's actually NLP practitioner training and life coach training, and that's an actual 8-day program that really teaches you how to totally shift your life. That particular program is probably, out of most of our programs, the most life-shifting program. People take quantum leaps in that particular program. What I've been sharing with you today comes out of our level 2 program, our career and life mastery level 2, which is our NLP master practitioner training. And you know, it's the values stuff that I believe really does create enormous shifts in people's lives. It creates a lot of energy. So those of you who are joining us for that, do expect that your energy is going to shift quite dramatically. Another program we run is our Speaking with Confidence program. That's a 7-day program that helps people to get them out of their fears of public speaking. And as a result of that, people's confidence levels tend to rise quite dramatically. But we'll show you exactly how to craft a talk, how to get over your fear. We'll absolutely collapse your fear of public speaking in this course. And so you could imagine that you'd have a lot of confidence. You know, whether you do one-on-one or whether you do one-on-many, it's really about your confidence. Doing a webinar, even though I can't actually see you, having confidence is of course important in webinars. You know, just trusting yourself to just let what needs to come out, and that way you can create the biggest shifts for people. And confidence for me was very important in my career. So Speaking with Confidence for me was a big life-shifting course. So that's a 7-day program. And then finally, Trainers Training is another 7-day program. And that's teaching people how to actually train people, how to get the best shifts for people in the quickest amount of time. So, you know, I think one thing that's going to be an issue in the future is time. You know, it is already. So most of our programs are structured for massive intensives, you know, investing the least amount of time, the least amount of money to get the biggest and most dynamic shifts possible. So that's essentially what Life Beyond Limits, what we're all about. And what we shared today was from our level 2 program. And I know that we've only spent, you know, just over an hour, you know, on this, you know, which we spend 3 days on. I'm hoping that you have gained a lot of value out of today just with the hour that I've shared with you. Of course, if I can spend, you know, 8 days with you or 7 days with you or 9 days with you, we can really do a huge amount of things and really take your life to the next level. So for those of you joining our level 2 program, here is essentially what we do in just a snapshot. It's really advanced NLP and life coach training. So, you know, if you really want to take yourself to the next level, or you want to be, you know, an absolute brilliant life coach, then this is the program for you. So you're equally, our meta programs, what I was talking about earlier, is a series of questions, and you'll learn these questions. And these questions, once a person answers these questions, you will actually know more about them in 3 minutes than they have known about themselves for their entire life. So equally, You'll learn some really cool techniques, how to stop behavior in a sentence, stop poor behavior in a sentence, and some very cool linguistics. So there are particular patterns of language that lots of leaders certainly could gain benefit from. Lots of coaches can definitely gain benefit from. And, you know, anyone, like a parent, you know, at the end of the day, it's how persuasive we are in our language and how purposeful we are in our language that determine the actual exceptional results that we get. So lots of the languaging skills that you learn in our Career and Life Mastery Level 2 program helps you to become a more efficient and effective communicator. So you'll also learn some very advanced neurological repatterning techniques, you know, that help change behavior quite quickly. And you'll discover the science of a strategy, how to actually create strategies for success. What is the actual science of that? How do we create success? How do we get in, you know, to the step-by-step process of creating success? And I love NLP for this. And this is why a lot of people learn NLP, is very much to start creating more success in their lives. So, of course, change your values neurologically. That's what we've been covering today. We haven't gone into how you actually change values because, again, we teach it over 3 days. So there is a lot in learning how to change values. It's not just merely a case of moving a word up and down the hierarchy. There is a particular process and technique to neurologically align them. You know, so you don't have to consciously think of your values, you just act as if your values are naturally there. Conversationally re-imprint the mind. You're going to learn some techniques. This is awesome for managers, leaders, and coaches. And as I said earlier, parents as well. You know, how to actually help your children to get the best out of your children. You know, how to have them change their beliefs just through a conversation. Very, very cool. Through this program, you'll be certified as a master coach and a master hypnotherapist, and also learn how to install the millionaire mindset. Now, one of the things that I believe more people who are able to start thinking like millionaires creates opportunities for people to have more money, to create more money in their lives so they can bring out the best of themselves. And, you know, that's not just simply saying that, you know, only money creates the best of yourself, but certainly money creates the opportunities to become the best that you can be. So, of course, you're going to learn how to install a millionaire mindset in our Career and Life Mastery Level 2. So it's about taking off like a rocket. The truth of the matter is, most people, 95% of people, really are not thinking. You know, they're largely unconscious of their behaviors. You know, they've got their head stuck in the sand, metaphorically. And this is about popping your head out and really becoming aware of your behaviors. What is getting the results? What sort of belief systems, what values are giving you the results that you're getting in your life? And really starting to become aware of that, and then having the tools to change those areas of your life. So for those of you who still have as yet not registered for our Career and Life Mastery Level 1 program, you can find out more information at this link. If you want to get a really short link, here's the bit.ly link that you can find out more about our programs, or you can call us on 613 or 03 if you're in Australia, 613-8669-1121. Business hours Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. That's Sydney time, Australia. And so what I'd like to do now is essentially thank you so much for being on this webinar. I hope I've been able to give you some value today that you could at least, you know, become to, I guess, you know, really understand, you know, what your values really are capable of achieving in your life. So anyone who is out there, you know, who's at, you know, a transition in their lives, you know, looking at changing, looking at moving to a whole different level of success, you know, or improving your relationships, then, you know, I urge you to, you know, invest. It only takes 20 minutes, 30 minutes maximum. Elicit your values. Find out what are those words And all your values, aim to get them in a singular word. So what's most important to you in the context of your career? And then you might say success, money, helping people, systems, being acknowledged, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll get a whole cluster of words. And then ultimately what you will do is then say, okay, what's really, really, really most important to you out of all those words? Put them in a hierarchy, number them 1 right through to, whatever number you get up to. And then what that's going to tell you is that's going to tell you where you're at right now, why your career is like it is, because your values pretty much determine that. So that's it for me. It's time for me to get my wetsuit on and enjoy one of my values and go surfing. So thank you so much for sharing all this time with me and investing this time in you. If you're joining us in our Career and Life Mastery, I get to meet you face to face because I'll be your trainer. And thank you so much for investing this time in you. And please, I implore you to live a life beyond limits and be the greatest person you could ever be. My name is Rick Schnabel. Bye for now. And thank you again for joining me on this webinar. I really appreciate it and value your time. Thank you kindly. Bye for now.